The police were already on my dock when I got there. That's how I knew this wasn't just another complaint. I had been out running errands when my neighbor called, his voice low but urgent, telling me I needed to get back to the cabin immediately because someone brought the cops. He didn't explain much, just enough to make it clear this wasn't normal. By the time I turned onto the gravel road leading to the lake, I could already see the flashing lights reflecting off the water. 2 patrol cars, parked right outside my property. And standing there, right at the edge of my dock like she owned it, was her. Arms crossed, chin slightly raised, waiting. I parked without rushing, stepped out, and took a second to take in the scene before walking down toward them. The officers noticed me first, turning slightly as I approached, but she didn't move. She just watched, like she had already decided how this was going to end. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. One of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, are you the owner of this property?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "What's going on?" He glanced briefly toward her before answering. "We received a report that this structure is part of an HOA and that you're refusing to comply with community regulations." I looked at him, then at her, then back again. "That's not true," I said. "I'm not part of any HOA." She stepped in immediately. "That's incorrect," she said. "This cabin falls within our lake community boundaries." I almost smiled, because I had heard this before, just not with police standing on my dock. "No," I said calmly. "It doesn't." Her expression tightened slightly, like she wasn't used to being contradicted this directly. "This entire lakeside is under HOA jurisdiction," she said. "We've had multiple complaints about your property." I looked around for a second, at the water, the shoreline, the cabins spaced out along the edge. Then I looked back at her. "You mean the same property I bought 5 years ago, with a deed that clearly shows it's outside your HOA?" I asked. She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she shifted. "You've ignored multiple notices," she said, "and now you're refusing lawful compliance." I let out a slow breath, trying to keep the conversation where it needed to be. "I ignored papers that don't apply to me," I replied. The second officer stepped forward slightly. "Ma'am, do you have documentation showing this property is part of the HOA?" he asked. There it was, the same question that always changes everything. Proof. Not confidence, not claims. Proof. She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "We manage this entire area," she said. "It's well established." "That's not documentation," the officer replied. That slowed her down, but it didn't stop her. "He's affecting community standards," she added, pointing toward the cabin. "We've issued fines, warnings." "Fines?" I cut in. "For what exactly?" "For non-compliance," she said sharply. I shook my head. "You can't fine someone who isn't part of your HOA." "You don't get to decide that," she replied. I looked at her for a second, then said something simple. "Actually, I do." That didn't sit well with her. At all. "You've been avoiding this long enough," she said. "That's why we escalated." "By calling the police?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Because you're refusing to follow enforceable rules." I turned to the officers again. "I'd be happy to show you my paperwork," I said. "Deed, survey, everything." The first officer nodded. "That would help." I gestured toward the cabin. "It's inside," I said. As I started walking up from the dock, I could feel all of them watching, but especially her. That same confidence was still there, but now there was something else mixed in with it. Expectation. Like she thought this was about to confirm everything she had been saying, like she believed whatever I brought back wouldn't be enough. I stepped inside, grabbed the folder I had kept since the day I bought the place, and came back out without rushing. When I handed it over, the officers took it seriously, flipping through the pages carefully instead of just glancing, and just like that, the energy started to shift. One of them paused on the survey map, looked closer, then closer again. The second officer leaned in slightly. Neither of them spoke, and that silence said everything. "What is it?" she asked, her tone sharper now. The first officer didn't answer immediately. He kept looking, tracing the boundary lines slowly, like he wanted to be absolutely sure before saying anything out loud. Then he looked up. "This property," he said, "is outside the HOA boundary." Just like that. Simple, clear, final. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, because the moment those words landed, her expression changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough. Enough to show that something had just gone very, very wrong. "That's not possible," she said quickly. "The map must be outdated." "It's not," I replied. She shook her head, stepping forward. "We've been managing this area for years." That doesn't mean you own it, I said. The second officer closed the folder and handed it back to me. From what we're seeing, he said, there's no indication that this property falls under HOA authority. That should have been the end, but it wasn't, because people like her don't stop when they're wrong. They push, and judging by the look on her face, she was about to push harder. For a few seconds after the officer said it, nobody spoke. That kind of silence only happens when something important has just been confirmed and one side doesn't know how to respond. I stood there holding the folder, the officers calm but clearly leaning toward what they had just verified, and her trying to recover. That map is wrong, she said finally, her voice tighter now. We've enforced this area for years. I nodded slightly. Yeah, I said. That's the problem. She frowned. What does that mean? It means you've been enforcing something you don't actually control, I replied. That landed harder than anything before, because now it wasn't just about my property, it was about everything she had claimed authority over. The first officer looked back at her. Ma'am, unless you have documentation that overrides this deed and survey, we have to go by what's been provided. She didn't have it, and everyone there knew it, but instead of stepping back, she changed direction. If he's not part of the HOA, she said quickly, then why is he using HOA-maintained property? That caught the officer's attention. Explain, one of them said. She pointed toward the water. The lake access, the dock system, the road leading here, all of it is maintained by the HOA, she said. If he's using those, he's subject to our rules. I almost smiled again, because now she had just opened a door she didn't understand. I looked at the officers. You want to see something else? I asked. They both nodded. I flipped open the folder again and pulled out another document, one I hadn't needed until now. It wasn't as obvious as the survey, but it mattered just as much. What you're looking at, I said, handing it over, is the easement agreement tied to this property. They started reading, and just like before, everything slowed down. She crossed her arms again, watching closely, waiting for this to swing back in her favor. This proves my point, she said. He's connected to the HOA infrastructure. The first officer didn't respond right away. He kept reading, his expression tightening slightly, not in confusion, but in focus. Then he looked up. This doesn't say what you think it says, he told her. That was the moment the ground shifted again. What do you mean? She asked. It means, he said, holding the paper slightly higher. This property has a legal easement granting access to the road and lake, but it's not owned or controlled by the HOA. Silence. Again. But heavier this time. Because this wasn't just about being outside the HOA. This confirmed something bigger. She had no control over access either. That's not possible, she said. But there was hesitation behind it now. The HOA built that access. I stepped in. No, I said. They maintain parts of it now. That doesn't make it theirs. The second officer nodded slightly. Maintenance doesn't equal ownership, he added. That was it. That was the second collapse. First, the property itself. Now, the access. Everything she had been standing on, gone. You're still benefiting from the community, she said, but even that sounded weaker now. I shrugged slightly. Through a legal easement, I replied, not your rules. She looked between all of us, clearly trying to find something, anything to hold on to. But there wasn't anything left. No authority, no jurisdiction, no leverage. Just assumptions that didn't hold up. The first officer closed the folder and handed it back to me again. Based on everything we've seen, he said, you're not part of the HOA, and your access rights are independently established. Clear, direct, final. Her shoulders tightened slightly, but she didn't argue this time. Because she couldn't. Not without proof, and she didn't have any. This needs to be reviewed, she said, but it didn't carry the same weight anymore. It already has been, I replied. That ended it. At least for the moment. The officers stepped back slightly, the situation now clearly resolved from their perspective. There's nothing further for us to enforce here, one of them said. This appears to be a civil misunderstanding. That word again, misunderstanding. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was overreach, and now it had been exposed. They turned and started heading back toward their cars, leaving the three of us standing near the dock. For a second, nobody spoke. Then she said something that told me everything. This isn't over. I looked at her calmly. It is, I said. She shook her head slightly, like she couldn't accept that yet. We'll take this further, she added. I nodded once. You can try. That was the difference now. Before she had confidence. Now, she only had effort. And those are not the same thing. She stood there for another moment, then turned and walked away toward her car, her steps slower than when she arrived. But I knew one thing for sure. People like her don't walk away quietly. They come back. And when they do, they usually make one last mistake. For a couple of days after that, everything went quiet again. No cars pulling up, no notices taped to the door, no sudden appearances at the edge of my dock. But I didn't assume it was over. Because the way she said, "This isn't over," wasn't frustration, it was intent. And people like that don't walk away without trying one more time. That attempt came sooner than I expected. 3 days later, I woke up to the sound of engines outside. Not just one car this time, but several. When I stepped out onto the porch, I saw them immediately. 2 HOA vehicles, 1 pickup truck, and a small group of people standing near the road that led down to my cabin, including her. But this time, she wasn't leading. 2 men in business attire stood beside her, holding folders, scanning the property like they were there for something more official than a conversation. Legal, maybe, or at least something meant to look like it. I walked down toward them without rushing. "What's this?" I asked. One of the men stepped forward. "We're here on behalf of the HOA," he said. "We've reviewed the situation and need to address access and usage of community-maintained property." I nodded slightly. "You mean the same access that's covered by a legal easement?" I replied. He didn't react to that right away, which told me he already knew. "We need to verify the scope of that easement," he said. Fair enough. At least that sounded like a real argument. "Then verify it," I said. I didn't move, didn't step back, didn't offer anything extra. Because everything they needed was already established. He opened his folder and pulled out a set of documents, flipping through them carefully. The second man stood beside him, reading along, both of them clearly trying to find something, anything, that would give them a foothold. Behind them, Karen stood silent, watching, waiting, not speaking. That alone told me everything. She had handed this off, because she couldn't win it herself. After a minute, the first man stopped flipping pages. He looked up, then at the second man, then back at me. "This easement is older than the HOA," he said. I nodded. "By a lot," I replied. The second man exhaled quietly like he had just reached the same conclusion. "And it's not limited by HOA authority," he added. There it was. Final confirmation. Not from me, not from assumptions, from their own side. Karen shifted slightly behind them, her posture tightening again, like she was realizing this wasn't going the way she expected. "But you're still using maintained access," she said, stepping forward again, trying to bring something back into the conversation. The first man didn't even look at her when he answered. "That doesn't change the legal standing," he said. That was it. That was the moment it ended for real. Because now it wasn't just challenged, it was confirmed from every direction, police, documents, and now even the people brought in to support her. There was nothing left, no angle, no interpretation, no argument, just a boundary that had always been there, and had finally been recognized. "We'll need to update our records," the second man said, closing the folder. "That would be a good idea," I replied. They didn't argue, didn't push, didn't try to twist anything. They just turned and walked back toward their vehicle, already discussing something quietly between themselves. And for the first time since this started, she was standing there alone, completely. She looked at me, and for a moment, it seemed like she might say something defensive, something final, something to hold on to. But she didn't, because there was nothing left to say. Everything she had built her argument on was gone. Without another word, she turned and walked back toward her car, slower this time, quieter, no confidence, no control, just movement, and that was the last time I saw her at my property. A week later, I heard what happened. There had been an internal HOA meeting, the kind they don't advertise, the kind where decisions get made quietly, and by the end of it, she wasn't in charge anymore. No announcement, no explanation, just replaced. Because even the HOA understood something she didn't. You can't enforce what you don't own. You can't control what you don't have authority over, and the moment you try, it stops being enforcement, it becomes a liability. As for me, everything went back to normal. The lake stayed quiet, the dock stayed mine, the road stayed open, no more notices, no more visits, no more claims. Just the cabin, exactly the way it had always been, outside their reach, completely. And every now and then, I'd think back to that first moment, seeing police standing on my dock, hearing her claim something that was never true. Because in the end, it wasn't about arguing louder. It was about knowing where the line actually is, and not letting anyone move it. How did like the story? Please comment and like, subscribe, and share my YouTube channel for more HOA stories.